Welcome to the Election Assistance Commission's training on logic and accuracy testing. This training will help you understand what logic and accuracy testing is, why it's important, and will offer some best practices that you can build into your testing process. Logic and accuracy testing scope, processes, and rules vary in each state. In this module, we will discuss some common elements and effective strategies that may be useful in your office, but it is important for you to review and follow the specific requirements in your state. Let's get started. Logic and accuracy, also called L&A testing, is a readiness test that ensures voting systems are properly configured, accurately counting, and working as expected before each election. No matter what type of voting equipment you use, you will need to do some logic and accuracy testing before each election. What do the terms logic and accuracy refer to? The logic component checks that election technology has been set up properly, both with the details of the particular election as well as the internal rules that govern how the system behaves. For example, L&A testing can check that voting machines only allow one valid vote in contests where there can only be one winner, or that the correct list of candidates is shown for each contest. The accuracy component makes sure that the voting system is counting votes correctly across all ballots. For example, L&A testing can check that marks on a ballot will be treated the same way for different candidates, contests, or ballot styles, or that tallied votes add up correctly in the final totals. During this training, we'll provide an overview of L&A testing on equipment that voters use to mark and cast a ballot. However, election administrators should also conduct pre-election testing on other election technologies as well, including election management systems that are used to create ballots and program individual pieces of voting equipment, electronic poll books used to check in voters and issue ballots, ballot on demand systems used to print a ballot for an individual voter, remote ballot marking systems, for example, those used by voters with disabilities or voters living abroad, election night reporting systems used to publish election results, and other supporting election technologies. L&A testing is a critical part of preparing for an election because it helps identify equipment that may not be functioning or programmed properly before it becomes a problem. Robust testing allows election officials to simulate how the equipment will be used during the election and verify that it performs as expected before voting begins. Careful planning allows election officials to simplify the testing process and make sure it follows state laws or regulations before testing begins. It is essential to create a thorough testing plan and standard operating procedure in advance, as testing often requires following many steps and can take a long time to complete. An effective standard operating procedure will cover the test process broadly in a way that will apply to every election. For help getting started, consider reviewing the U.S. Election Assistance Commission's Standard Operating Procedures training. A standard operating procedure for L&A testing might include reviewing state rules and other requirements, determining the amount of time testing will require and when it will occur, identifying the people involved and ensuring their availability to assist, coordinating with vendors, other election officials, or other staff in your jurisdiction that are needed for support, notifying the public of opportunities to observe testing, and verifying and completing chain of custody information before and after testing. It is also critical that standard operating procedures include checks to ensure ballots are programmed and designed properly before testing begins. This involves proofing each ballot style to make sure that all races, candidates, terms to be elected, and other details are properly set. Now let's focus on 3 other essential preparations that should occur before testing begins. 1. Developing detailed checklists to be used during testing. 2. Creating and reviewing test ballots and predetermined vote patterns. And 3. Preparing for public observation. For simplicity and accountability, it is helpful to lay out test procedures as a checklist that can be followed when testing each type and piece of equipment. Checklists can also serve as the documentation of a completed test. Your state may provide a standard checklist, but if not, consider creating your own simple form. A checklist should be able to properly guide testers through the testing process. It should include steps to load election definition files onto voting equipment and verify equipment is programmed with the correct version of the election. Verify the correct date and time is set on the device, allowing for daylight savings time changes that might occur before or while equipment is in use. Cast test ballots that include a predetermined pattern of votes. Generate test results from the voting system. Compare the test results to the expected results. And delete test results from voting equipment when the test is complete. Each type of voting equipment, whether it be precinct or central scanners, ballot marking devices, or the election management system, should have a pre-made checklist for testers to use so that they can document their actions and log any issues they encounter. Effective L&A testing requires creating a predetermined pattern of votes that will be used to test voting equipment before an election. The pattern of votes is designed to cover every voting option on the ballot, making sure that each option can be voted and is counted correctly during testing. Since the predetermined pattern generates predictable vote totals when the test is conducted, these expected results can also be used to check the results generated by the voting system. The predetermined vote pattern should always be documented on a chart or other written record. This allows election administrators to easily verify that test ballots are marked correctly and equipment is properly counting votes. Let's look at several best practices for creating predetermined vote patterns using a simple scenario. Imagine you are creating a vote pattern for a vote for one contest with 2 candidates, A and B, along with one write-in option. Include at least one valid vote for all candidates. You will need 3 ballots to start with. Ballot 1, Candidate A, vote. Ballot 2, Candidate B, vote. Ballot 3, write-in, vote. Vary the vote totals for each option in the contest. This makes sure equipment is not recording a vote for Candidate A as a vote for Candidate B and vice versa. In the scenarios so far, all 3 options have the same number of votes, so you can't tell them apart just by looking at the totals. To vary the totals using the fewest numbers of extra test ballots, give Candidate A 3 votes, Candidate B 2 votes, and the write-in option 1 vote. 3 more ballots are needed to do that. Ballot 4, Candidate A, vote. Ballot 5, Candidate B, vote. Ballot 6, Candidate A, vote. Include an overvote. This tests that the system knows how many valid votes are allowed in the contest. Add a 7th ballot with an overvote. Because overvotes are not valid, the totals should remain the same. This process is then repeated for all other contests on the ballot. Keep in mind, each test ballot could be used to test more than one contest at a time. When you've finished documenting the vote pattern for each contest, you can begin creating the actual test decks of ballots. A test deck is a set of ballots for a particular election, marked according to the predetermined pattern of votes. You should test every part of the voting system that will be used to mark or count ballots in a realistic manner. That means you'll need a test deck for 1. Each ballot style used in your election. Fill out the vote pattern for the contests that appear on each ballot style using as many copies of the ballot as necessary to complete the pattern. 2. All ballot types and marking methods used in your jurisdiction. This could include ballots creating using different methods and different ballot paper. For example, testing pre-printed ballots as well as ballots printed on demand or on ballot paper that will be used by a mail ballot vendor. Testing should also reflect how voters will actually mark their choices. For example, by hand, using touchscreen voting machines, or even using remote ballot marking systems if these systems are available for voters to use. Fill out the pattern of votes for all ballot styles that could be used in each scenario. Voting machines that serve multiple precincts should be tested with the applicable ballot styles for each precinct, and equipment that serves all precincts should be tested with all ballot styles. Once you have all your test decks marked, it's time to count them. It can take significant time to fully complete the L&A process given the many kinds of ballots and pieces of voting equipment that need to be tested. To save time, some election officials choose to hire vendors to create pre-made patterns of votes or provide test decks with voter marks included. If you use a vendor for test materials, be sure to carefully review those materials before testing to ensure they meet state rules and have all the vote patterns included. It's also a good idea to supplement pre-made test decks with some hand-marked ballots. That way you're testing some ballots as they will actually be issued to and marked by voters. Here are a few tips for hand-marking a test deck of ballots. Remember to include realistic ballot markings. Test ideal marks and those that should be good enough to make sure the system responds appropriately. Use the same pens or markers you ask voters to use to check that those marks are read correctly. Test stray marks on a few test ballots to make sure they don't interfere with counting. Mark a few ballots using a pencil or a writing utensil that isn't specifically recommended to be used to see how your system reacts. As voting equipment is being tested, testers can check the overall condition of the equipment and verify it is functioning properly. Issues that come up may be minor and easily fixed, like adjusting the calibration of a touchscreen. Other errors may result in removing a piece of equipment from service. In either case, testers should document the issue and actions taken on the checklist. After test ballots are cast, it is important to review the results report from each piece of equipment. Verify that the vote totals match what you expect them to be by comparing them to the predetermined pattern of votes. Any discrepancies in the results should be documented and investigated. In some cases, errors might be easily explained, like when a ballot in the test deck is marked incorrectly or a tester forgets to scan a certain test ballot. Others may require reprogramming the piece of equipment. Once the cause for the error is discovered, testers can retest the device. After completing testing on each piece of equipment, it's critical to clear the test results so that the device shows no votes have been cast when it is used during the election. Your checklist should include a step to reset vote counters and confirm that they are back to zero. When all equipment has been fully tested and determined to be functioning as required, complete certification forms or other documentation to create a final record of the test. All results, test ballots, and equipment should be securely stored, properly labeled, and sealed so that a clear chain of custody is maintained and can be verified later. Finally, many states require that L&A testing be open to public observation, though the specifics may vary by state. Election officials can take several steps ahead of time to make sure members of the public can meaningfully observe testing without hindering the process. Set the ground rules for observers before testing begins. This could include explaining do's and don'ts, using a code of conduct, and establishing clear boundaries for areas where observers are allowed. Posting signage or reminders about these rules can be helpful as well. Develop a handout to help observers understand what they'll see during the test. The handout can describe the testing process step by step and can also include answers to frequently asked questions. Remember to write simply and clearly and avoid terms the public may not know. Designate a staff member to interact with the public during the test. This person can answer observer questions, explain the testing process, and provide the results of testing when you are finished. Ideally, this staff member will not be responsible for testing duties. Before we close, let's check your understanding of the material with a few questions. Read the question and answer choices, select your answer, then select Submit. Thank you for joining us for this training on logic and accuracy testing. We hope you have learned some helpful and simple ways that you prepare for and conduct this testing in your election office. As always, thank you for your work in elections, and thank you for watching.